Greetings and welcome to America in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today, as he does each and every week, is Casey Harper, the Center Square's Washington, D.C. bureau chief. How are you, Casey?
Doing good, Dan. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm actually on the road, stopping in Little Rock, Arkansas, on my way to Huntsville, Texas, dropping my daughter back off at college, Sam Houston State. She'll be a junior this year. Only a 6-hour drive to go after being in the car for about 11 hours yesterday.
Wow. So good road trip so far. Do you have any road trip traditions?
Not really. Get there as quickly
Great,
as I
cool.
can.
Good talk. Okay. Speeding, is that a road trip tradition?
So I try to keep it not much more than 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, although my daughter might disagree with that. But we had a good trip yesterday, not too much traffic. Just going to be happy to get there later today. Anyway, Casey, we have some exciting news to share today. We are recording this on Friday, August 18th. Casey, I'm excited to share with our listeners that the Center Square has teamed up with Noble Predictive Insights to launch a new national poll. Mike Noble, owner and CEO of Noble Predictive, is among the best pollsters in the country, and earlier this month, the beginning of August, he and his team surveyed 2,500 American voters, 1,000 registered Democrats, 1,000 registered Republicans, 500 independents, and you've started writing about the results of those polls at thecentersquare.com.
Yeah, that's right. This was a really interesting poll, a cool step for the Center Square. If people want to see more about it, they can go to thecentersquare.com. We have, multiple articles diving into it. And as you said, this evenly surveyed Republicans and Democrats. Sometimes these polls will have secretly surveyed more Democrats or more Republicans, and then the poll can be kind of skewed. So I appreciate that about it. There's some really interesting takeaways, though, Dan. I think top of the list on those is the poll asked voters about some of the most likely potential face-offs, right? So it asked people who they would choose between Trump and Biden and DeSantis and Biden. So the two, first and second place in the Republican primary race, how would they fare against the incumbent president, Joe Biden? And what the poll found is it's basically a tie, between whichever Republican ends up going against Biden. People are pretty much either they want the Republican candidate, DeSantis and Trump, or they want Biden, right? And there are, plenty of undecideds in there, but I think that's a really interesting development that we've come to between where Trump and DeSantis are somewhat seen interchangeably at the general election level. I'm not sure what you take away from that. I mean, I think to me, honestly, that's kind of not great for DeSantis because there's so many people who are never Trumpers that you would think that DeSantis would be able to kind of build more of a lead out against Biden. But I think especially with older voters, they trend more towards Biden, and DeSantis hasn't been able to build any kind of gap, even setting aside his problems in the Republican primary. Yeah,
that is an interesting takeaway, Casey. Of course, former President Trump is crushing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and all of the competition currently in polling in the GOP primary, even in the Center Square Voters' Voice poll, which is what we're calling it. But Trump himself also faces 4 criminal indictments. It could be spending campaign season in the courtroom instead of on the campaign trail. For me, the poll shows that then even if Trump has to bow out, is forced to bow out, that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis does equally well against Biden, even though he's trailing Donald Trump in the GOP primary by 20 plus percentage points. If voters if Republican voters choose that or say that these indictments against Trump are not good, and the first primaries are in January. Of course, we still have 5 or so months before voters actually go to the polls to start deciding, that DeSantis is in the wings and could prove to be a decent matchup against Biden himself.
Yeah, that's right. And, there is also the question of enthusiasm and voter turnout, right? There's plenty of people who will, when they're taking a survey, answer something, but they may not be as enthusiastic about it. And if something comes up on election day, they may not make it to the polls, right? So I think Trump has a lot of the enthusiasm in the Republican base, but he's turned off a lot of independents. So DeSantis, though, I think could have a better chance of getting some of those never Trumpers. He would just have to work to create that same enthusiasm in the Republican base that Trump has been able to maintain for so many years.
So your story on the campaign and how voters feel about the candidates, both President Biden on the Democratic side and former President Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former Vice President Mike Pence, and the large field of Republican candidates, that is now available at thecentersquare.com. But we have plenty of stories yet to come off of the poll. Casey, we surveyed 2,500 American voters on issues such as the border, such as the fentanyl crisis, such as the economy, such as educational issues. Those stories, government spending and how Americans feel about government spending and inflation, those stories are yet to come.
Yeah, I mean, we have more. People should definitely check back at thecentersquare.com. I think just to give you a few more takeaways before we wrap up here that I found were interesting. Trump beats Biden with Hispanic voters by 5 points. So Trump has been called a racist, and a racist specifically against Hispanics because of his border policies for many, many years. But he's, at least for now, he beats Biden by 5 points, which is really notable, especially because certain swing states like Arizona are heavily Hispanic. I mean, it's like a third Latino in Arizona, for instance. So that's not a small number. In the Republican primary field, I'll just go through the list really quickly. DeSantis has 18%. This is alphabetical. So Trump has 53% support in the Republican primary field. Tim Scott, I'll actually do an order. So Mike Pence on this poll comes in third at 7%. Vivek Ramaswamy comes in fourth at 6%. Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, the South Carolina senator and governor respectively, come in next at 4%. And then, Chris Christie's at 1%. And then there's several candidates like Larry Elder, Asa Hutchinson, Francis Suarez, and others who have 0%, or at least less than half.
Less than 1%. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they can't round up basically to 1. But so that's kind of the lay of the Republican field. As you said, Trump is crushing it. And, we do have an upcoming presidential debate, which could shake things up a little bit. But right now, Trump's not going to appear at the debate, which is an interesting development.
Look forward to our reporting at thecentersquare.com on the debate, and listeners can daily for the next 2 weeks look for stories on the Center Square Voters Voices poll at thecentersquare.com. But Casey, we are out of time. Thank you for your insight into this story. Voters can keep up with this story and more, and all of the polling stories at thecentersquare.com. For Casey Harper, I'm Dan McCaleb. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe.